Thanks for joining me for another video. Last week, if you remember, we talked about the Hellenists in our mini-series about the Second Temple era Jewish sects, S-E-C-T-S. I feel like I always have to say that. I know that some of you are probably getting a little bit tired of hearing it, like it's a bad joke. It's not, okay? It's I have actually had people ask me, Sects, what do you mean Sects? No, S-E-C-T-S, not S-E-X, okay? So I've had to clarify that in the past, so if you are getting sick of that, I'm sorry. But the good news is you've only got like one more video after this where I'm going to say it, probably. Yeah, last week we spoke about the Hellenists, and the Hellenists were kind of important to the story of Hanukkah. I say kind of important, they were the bad guys, okay? They were actually part of the bad guy coalition, an entire coalition of bad guys coming after us. It's a really fantastic story. If you haven't read up on it yet, you really need to, because it's almost funny. Okay, it's almost something that Shakespeare might write a tragedy with a lot of humor in it about. Okay, the week before the Hellenists, we talked about Essenes, who were sort of this mystical, sort of hyper strict group out in the Judean desert. Okay, and then there were, the week before that, we discussed the Pharisees, who are the predecessor of modern-day rabbinical Judaism, what we call rabbinical Judaism, to distinguish it from Sicarii Judaism. From Sicarii Judaism. And the only reason I paused there is because I was like, well, I mean, do the Reform and conservative movements, are they really distant enough from rabbinical Judaism to consider them a different group? No, they're a part of rabbinical Judaism. They're just more liberal, in my opinion, more liberal than they should be, but it's not important. Then the week before the Pharisees, we talked about the Sadducees, and that brings us to where we are today with the Zealots. Okay, we're also very likely going to talk a little bit about the Sicarii today, because the Sicarii was sort of like a subgroup of the Zealots. So like you have the Zealots, we'll call them, pick whatever political party you want. Okay, not that politics is important, but politics is only of passing importance. Think of whatever political party you want, and within that political party, I promise you there are going to be different factions. You may call them caucuses where you are. You may call them by some other name, but there are different factions within every political party. You could argue that the Zealots are, as a whole, like a political party, and the Sicarii are a faction within that political party. Speaking of political parties, the historian Josephus specifically mentions that the Zealots are the fourth, he calls them the fourth school, like the fourth school of thought, of Jewish thought of the time. And I could see why he'd say that, but I wouldn't say that. I would, be a little bit better. They are, the Zealots as a whole are a group of zealots. Okay, these are radicals. All right, let's be open and honest about it. These are radicals. These are hyper nationalists. Okay, if I don't know that hyper nationalists would be the right word for it, but they are more nationalist than any right-wing group around right now. They were not, as a whole, they were not racist in the sense that they discriminated against people who were not a part of Israel. However, they weren't necessarily welcoming either. They were, it was one of those things. They understood that everyone is different, that everyone has their own free will, and they're going to use that free will however they want. However, they noticed a pattern of disturbing behavior where Jews were targeted for being Jews, and it was always non-Jews who were doing that targeting. Okay, like the recent terrorist attack in Australia at Bondi Beach. Also, there were a few other recent events where Jews were targeted specifically for being Jews. And I'm just guessing here, but I am 99.999% certain none of the people that did those things were Jews either. Okay, so you could see this is still a problem. The Zealots would honestly probably fit in very well here. And by here, I mean in this century. Although we do have autonomy in our homeland again, so they'd be happy about that. Zealotry, or the Zealots, were more of a political ideology than they were a religious ideology. Okay, they were made up of different people from different religious groups within Judaism, and probably not the Sadducees, though. Sadducees were a little bit liberal, certainly not the Hellenists, because they were actually opposed to the Hellenists. Okay, the Hasmonean army would have been a part of the Zealots had the group existed in those days. The word zealot, in reference to this group, comes from the Greek word zelotes, which means a zealous follower. Okay, means the same thing it does in English. Okay, it in turn, the Greek zelotes is the Koine translation of the Hebrew original Qanaim, which means those who are zealous. Okay, so we're not seeing any sort of trickery going on with translations or anything like that. They all seem to be presenting the same idea. Okay. Now the Zealots were, let me just take a quick look at my notes, make sure that I didn't forget anything. Yeah, so the Zealots were not a single ideology. The only thing really that united them in their goal, or in their, the only thing that provided any sort of unity, really, any sort of a cohesive feeling to them, was very simply the fact that they wanted to force all foreign powers out of Israel. It wasn't necessarily that they wanted foreigners out, it was that they wanted no foreign influence in internal matters. Okay, they wanted to reestablish Israelite autonomy in the land of Israel. Okay, that's what they were fighting for. They felt that, hey, the Hasmonean army did it just less than, actually it was right around 200 years prior. We could do it too, by golly, let's do it. And so they tried, and I'm just going to go ahead and let you know, in case you don't already, they failed. They didn't just fail, they failed miserably. But we'll get to that, okay? Some of these groups were messianic, some of them were not. And in this case, by messianic, I mean some of them believed that either their leader or someone within their movement was potentially the Messiah. Okay, that is the mark of a messianic group, if you're a Jew. Okay, if you're not a Jew, I don't know what to tell you, because Messiah is a Jewish concept. It's an exclusively Jewish concept, and anybody who uses the word, it comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, which honestly just means someone who's been anointed, or more in a more pedestrian sort of way, someone that had oil smeared on them. Okay, it's nothing really special. right? And every Christian who's watching this is like, but wait a minute, what? The Messiah is not a big deal if you're Jewish, okay? I understand it's the entirety of the Christian religion. I understand that it plays a significant role in Islamic eschatology. But there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is because the Jews had the idea. And Islam really screwed things up when it comes to correctly interpreting much of anything in Jewish scripture and Jewish thought. Christianity really appears to have followed after a schismatic group off of the original Jewish following after Jesus. We're actually very briefly going to talk about Jesus later too. Well, not him, but his disciples. And him for that matter. So when I say Messiah, just think king. Okay, that's what it means colloquially. Okay, that's what it means. Literally, yes, it means anointed, but colloquially, what it's referring to is the king. If used in that sense, the only other sense that it could be used in would be the anointed Kohen, the Israelite priest from the tribe of Levi, the descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses. Okay, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, is also called, according to the Torah, he's also called Mashiach. It's not important for this video. It is important, but not for this video. In fact, I know a family whose last name is Mashiach, Messiah, and they are one of the priestly families. I just think that that's a really interesting thing. That, like, when I first saw the last name, I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. Are you serious right now? They were serious. Just didn't mean what I thought it meant at first. So, Zealots, because I'm way off topic. Let's see what I got. Yeah, so some of these were messianic groups in the respect that they believed that their leader or someone within their movement was messianic, was the Messiah. There were other groups that were not messianic. They didn't believe that they knew who the Messiah was. They just wanted the Romans out, by golly, and so they were willing to pick up arms and make that a reality. And I love that sort of energy. That's really just sort of, well, the Romans are here, they're raping our women, they're killing our men. What's to stop us from just attacking them and trying to force them out? That would have been me. I would have been the one to found the zealotry movement. Okay, it would have been me. It would have been, coincidentally, the guy who founded it was also named Judah, Judah of Galilee. From, if I remember correctly, it was from the city of Gamla. He founded it in the year 6 CE, which is a significant date when it comes to Christianity, because that was the date of Quirinius's census that the Gospel of Luke records Joseph and Mary going to Bethlehem for that census. The story in Luke is nonsense. It didn't happen the way that it's written, because you don't move an entire population to their ancestral hometown from thousands of years ago just because you want a census. That would be a logistical nightmare. Okay, you keep them in place, and then you say, okay, so where are you really from? If you really care about that. Why would the Romans care where they were from? They wouldn't. Okay, but it's an interesting point because, and I believe that the whole story there is just to, the only reason that Luke mentions that census and people going to Bethlehem and whatnot is because he had to establish a time frame. He wants Jesus born in the year 6 CE, for whatever reason. Problem with that is King Herod died a decade before, and in Matthew's version, Herod is trying to kill baby Jesus. So I don't know how people harmonize the two. I don't know how they try to explain the difference in years. If it were me, though, I wouldn't even try. I would just be like, yeah, okay, so maybe they got a couple details wrong. If that. If I even talk about it, reality is I don't think anybody talks about it, and that's fine. That's fine. It's really a minor point, and if you get hung up on minor points, you're going to be objecting to everything. Okay? Oh, why is his hair brown? Why is his eye? Why are his eyes blue? Why does Jesus always appear in the pictures to be Italian or some other type of European wearing Greek clothing? Why? Answer me this. Why? Well, the reason is nobody was there. None of the people that painted him were actually there to see him. So they just went with what they thought he would have been wearing, what he thought he would have looked like. So that's the answer to that. That's a fun story. So Judah the Galilean, or Judah of Gamla, in the year 6 CE, founded the Zealot movement to specifically because of the census, the very same census that's mentioned in the Gospel of Luke. For those of you who may be new to my channel, no, I do not believe that anything in the New Testament is, well, I can't say anything. I do not believe in the general veracity of the claims made in the New Testament. There are some things, obviously, that are going to be historically accurate. And certainly I'm not going to disagree with it when it correctly quotes my scripture. However, there are issues, and many Christians are well aware of those issues, and that's fine. And I don't want to bash that, because I mean, hey, listen, you're better off a Christian than a pagan. I think I actually told someone that not too long ago. It is a more, well, nowadays everything is more loving, more accepting, less kill, kill, kill. But in the old days, everything was really that way. But at least as a Christian, okay, so you believe in the God of Israel, okay. It's great news. It's wonderful. And I am happier with you just simply believing in him. I don't care if you don't believe just like me. It doesn't matter to me. It may matter to you. It may matter eventually. To all of us, it may eventually matter, but that's not important. We're not going to talk about that today. But I don't think it will. Okay? You do you, I'll do me, and if you let me be me, I'll let you be you. And I really feel like somebody's made that into a song already, but if they haven't, have at it. There's your free song idea for you. I have no idea where I am in my notes. So Judah, the Galilean, and his name given in the New Testament is Theudas. They were both a part of the Zealot movement. They're both actually mentioned in the book of Acts, chapter 5. They're mentioned in the wrong order, and as it happens, Theudas, man, you ever have that happen where you're just sitting there and your brain is just like, huh? Like your brain just doesn't want to brain for a minute. Theudas is a bit of a problem for the book of Acts, because his rebellion hadn't even begun when the story in the book of Acts is alleged to have taken place. So that's a bit of a problem. Okay, but the fact is, they are both, Judah and Theudas, they're both mentioned in the book of Acts, and I think that that's a very cool thing. they are both members of the Zealot movement. And here are a few other ones who are also coincidentally relatively popular, okay, are relatively well known. Okay, so you've got Shimon of Perea, whose followers, I just think this is a really interesting point, his followers actually believed that the Romans would kill him, that they would crucify him, and that after 3 days of being dead, that he would get up, he would get better, right, like a bad Monty Python joke. He'd get better, and he would lead his army to victory. Well, that sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? I just think that's a really interesting thing. And he, coincidentally, he died sometime before Herod did. And by some time before, I mean, let's say within the last couple of years of Herod's life, King Herod the Great. He's not a very well-known guy, but what we do know about him is that he was the very first messianic claimant to claim, yeah, the Romans are absolutely going to kill me, but it's okay. I'll come back. I'll get better, right? In 3 days' time. Nobody knows where he got this 3 days thing, right? Except that we actually do know where Shimon got this from. There was a prophecy, not a biblical prophecy, but there was a prophecy that was made by a man in his time that he probably knew who claimed to be a prophet, and he gave this prophecy that said that Shimon would be struck down, that he would be killed, and he would stay that way for 3 days, and then suddenly he'd get back up, and it would be very dramatic, I'm sure, in a very interesting nighttime television sort of way, and they would, go into Jerusalem, and they would, just force all the Romans out and everything. And in case you're wondering, in case I have to spell this out for you, it never happened. Okay, he didn't get better. He didn't rise from the dead after 3 days that we're aware of. Perhaps he did, and he said, you know what, this whole, war thing, it sounds fun. I'm going to go over here, though. We're going to go do something else. We have no record of that happening, but we also don't have any record of him rising from the dead either. Okay. Another interesting bit of information. Christians, I really don't like doing this to you, I swear. It's very possible that Jesus was also a zealot, and that several of his disciples were as well. The reason that I suggest that is because of some of his teachings in the Gospels that the church honestly just sort of looks at and says, I don't know, man. It's I don't know, but we can't preach on this on Sunday. They look at it and they're just like, I'm so uncomfortable. We'll just never bring this up again. And they haven't. I've yet to hear anyone really in Christianity even talking about it. It would be, if I were a Christian, this would be one of the first things that I would bring up. Hey, man, did you know that Jesus told his disciples, listen, guys, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one? Like, it's just such a weird thing for the Jesus of Christianity that everyone knows to say, right? Another interesting expression that he said, the whole give unto Caesar what's Caesar's and unto God what's God's, could also be interpreted as a zealot statement, Yeah, let him keep his gold because that's all he's going to get from us. We're going to force Caesar out, So, and there are a number of other statements that he's made throughout the Gospels that really lead me, and not just me, but also what are they called? New Testament scholars to conclude that Jesus may very well have been a zealot, which would make his group of disciples not really disciples as much as a cell group, a sleeper cell. There we go. That's the right way. A sleeper cell of these zealots, these radical nationalists, right? And as if I needed to mention this, if you claim to be the Messiah, if your followers claim that you're the Messiah, and you lived 2,000 years ago in Rome or in any part of the Roman Empire, Judea certainly qualifies, then you would have been a zealot. Because you don't have normal people saying, oh, here is the king of Israel. You don't have normal people saying that. You have people who want to force this guy into the kingship. Okay, so we're talking, these are armed groups, these are militants. They really sort of operated, and I hate to use this analogy, but they really sort of operated like a terrorist network. They had these cells that were really, to be honest with you, very disconnected from each other. If you've ever seen Monty Python's The Life of Brian, it's hilarious, by the way. Not a fan of John Cleese, but based on recent statements that he's made. But the movie was good. It was funny. Don't let your kids watch it. But it portrays there being multiple different factions of the resistance, the Jewish resistance against Rome. That's how it was. Okay, that was the Zealot movement. That's exactly what it was like. Okay, now moving on from that, we're going to talk about the Sicarii for a very brief moment. So the Sicarii, as I mentioned earlier, if the Zealots were a political party, then the Sicarii was a hyper-radicalist faction within that political party. Okay, so this would be, these guys absolutely were I don't know that racist is the right term for it, but they were absolutely prejudiced against anyone who was not a Jew. It was founded, the Sicarii movement was founded by Menachem, the son of Judah the Galilean. So I think that's cute, right? Like father to like son, right? Dad founds the Zealot movement, and Menachem's just like, they're not radical enough for me, Dad. I'm going to start my own thing. And Judah didn't say anything because he was dead at that point, but he just sort of from heaven, I don't know if you want to call it that, he's just like, go ahead, son, here's the baton, like it's a relay race, right? Of all the irreverent ways to phrase that, man, what was I even talking about now? Yeah, so these guys were absolutely insane, okay? If you were to say that the Zealots were like right-wing extremists, okay, so the Sicarii were like, these are just like full-blown terrorists, okay? They would literally kill anyone who disagreed with them, including their fellow Jews, including rival Zealot factions. Okay, these guys were absolutely insane. All right, they had no regard for what the means were, as long as the end. Right. Spoiler alert: the ends did not justify the means. The Sicarii were named, and we'll get back to the ends not justifying the means here in just a second. The Sicarii were named Sicarii because of the blade that they used. They would carry a dagger on their person. Okay, these are hardcore Second Amendment rights advocates. It's a joke. If you live outside of the U.S., maybe you get it, but if you live in the U.S., for sure you're gonna get that. These guys believed in being armed at all times because you never know when you're gonna have to stab a guy, right? I'm not making this up. Okay, this is literally how they thought. Look it up. Okay, I promise you it's that way. Look it up. If Jesus and his group of disciples were zealots, there is a very reasonable possibility that Judas Iscariot, the only disciple, by the way, this is my opinion, okay, I'm just throwing my opinion in here, he was the only disciple who got it, who understood, who truly understood what Jesus was teaching. If you read the Gospels, okay, the whole time he's like, listen, I have to be killed, I have to be crucified, I gotta be killed because how else am I gonna rise from the dead, right? 11 of his disciples are like, dear God, what do you mean? That's absurd. I don't understand. Judas, who doesn't have any speaking roles until the Last Supper, he just doesn't. And he says exactly one line, is it me, Lord? And then it's over. Like that's the last thing he says in all of the Gospels. You know, it's a question. It's in the Gospel of John, if you want to look that up. But Judas Iscariot, of the 12 disciples of Jesus in the Gospels, is the only one who gets it, right? He's the only one who's like, oh, he's got to die, he's got to be crucified so he could rise from the dead, and I get it. Okay, I'll just betray him? No, he didn't betray anybody. No. Jesus outright told him to. Go read the Gospel of John at that part. Jesus outright told him to. Okay? I think it's John, I can't remember. It's been so long. Read the Gospels, the Last Supper moment, except in John, now that I think about it, in John, there is no Last Supper. It's kind of a weird thing to say. There is no Last Supper because there's a completely different scene going on, okay? Go read it. If you don't believe me, go read it. In fact, I encourage you to go read it anyway, if you're a Christian, because it's just kind of an interesting thing. If you're Jewish, you don't really have to. Unless you want to, in which case there are plenty of online Bibles that you could read. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, so Judas betrays Jesus after Jesus told him to, and then later on he either commits suicide or he falls to his death. There are two different versions, which coincidentally could be harmonized, but I mean it seems a bit extreme that anyone would have to harmonize them, but that's not important. But yeah, so scholars believe that, and by scholars I mean not all scholars, and I mean just, you know, of those who do, I am not one, okay, believe that Judas Iscariot may very well have been a member of the Sicarii. And the reason they believe that is because of the similarity between Sicarii and Iscariot, okay? It's not relevant if he was or wasn't, but if he was, then it makes total sense, because, you know, again, the Sicarii were prone to killing, betraying, murdering, assassinating members of other zealot factions. Okay, they just did. Now, what happened to the Zealots? What happened to the Sicarii? So they kind of disbanded because when Rome crucifies the majority of your people, you really lose all will to fight. And that was themselves were crushed, absolutely crushed in the years CE. which is 3 years after the destruction of the temple. They were crushed and were no longer in existence after that. The last of the Sicarii died when they took their own lives. They were besieged in the mountain fortress of Masada. They were the one. Well, they were part of the group that were there. I guess it really was their last stand. And it's sad because honestly, there were heroes at Masada. They were. Regardless of what they did before that, they their attempts to force Rome out were very noble. The only thing that I really disagree with is their means. This is a case where the means are not justified by the end. They died. End of the Sicarii right there. The ends could not justify the means. The Zealots as a whole, the Zealot movement, would be around for I think another couple hundred years before it just sort of died out. Now, they didn't leave us any records. They didn't leave us any... it was a political ideology more than a religious one, so they didn't leave us any religious texts. It just sort of... It was, it was like a... What's the expression? It was a flash in the pan. It just sort of like it popped up and everyone's like, yeah, let's get Rome out. Now is the time for the Messiah to show up. And he didn't, in case anybody's curious. And then it just sort of died out just as fast. Sad. Because honestly, they could have succeeded if they could have just united. Put aside their petty squabbling, their bickering, and gone after the real enemy. And then, perhaps when other Jews would have seen their unity, perhaps they would have joined in, and perhaps we could have forced out Rome, and perhaps the Messiah could have come at that time. I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm not God, so I have no way to know when Messiah would have been there, or when he is going to be here. But I can tell you definitively, the Messiah has not shown up yet. Maybe tomorrow. You never know. There's always tomorrow. And until Mashiach comes, there's always tomorrow. And there will always be a Jew, coincidentally. Anyway, that's all I've got for the day. So, next week we're going to tackle the final segment of our Second Temple era Jewish sects, S-E-C-T-S, I said it again. And that would be Jewish Christians, the early Christian movement. Before it became Christianity, it was in fact a Jewish sectarian splinter group. So we're going to talk a little bit about that next week. So that being said, I am done. So until next time, shalom.